Stark Mirror is an okay film, but I definitely think I enjoyed it more because Kirstie Alley's in it. She's the only reason that I wanted to watch this. But I did watch Stark originally, the first film. I watched that first because I wanted to get a better understanding of the character, and I just thought I might as well. I didn't love that film, so I probably wouldn't have watched the sequel had Kirstie Alley not been in it. But actually, I'm glad I had a reason to watch this because it's definitely better than the first film, which is unusual for sequels. This was released in 1986. It's directed by Noel Nosseck and, of course, stars Kirstie Alley as Maggie Carter and Nicolas Surovy as Patrick Evans Stark. And Stark is trying to find out who killed a fellow police officer, and he ends up going to Las Vegas. From Wichita, Kansas, he goes to Las Vegas, where Maggie is a performer, and he thinks that Maggie holds some of the answers that he needs. And I won't say exactly how or what the connection is, but it makes sense that he would go to her. It's well enough written that I believe that, and she doesn't have as significant a role in this as I would have expected, given the fact that it's being promoted as a film with Kirstie Alley. That's not to say she's not in it a lot. I just feel like her character could have been a little bit more interesting. The character was fine, but not as fascinating as I would have liked. And while Stark is investigating this, other things come up that lead him down several paths, and we have other characters brought in who are potential suspects, and it's interesting enough. It's not the most fascinating murder mystery, and I think that's largely because the suspects themselves are kind of boring, and I just wasn't that concerned about finding out who was responsible. But then something does happen a little later on that may or may not be connected, and I was keen to find out what was going on there. So there are bits of the mystery that I thought were quite fascinating. There were bits that were kind of dull. So it's okay. It's not an amazing story, but there was enough there to keep me engaged. Stark is an absolutely fine character. I have no problems with the character or following his journey or believing in his motivation. All of that worked well enough, and Kirstie Alley was amazing and as wonderful as she always is. But the character of Maggie, as I said, was not as interesting as I would have liked. At least her role within the story was not as fascinating as I'd perhaps hoped for, but nevertheless, it was fine. It is definitely better than the first film. And I think for me that's partly because the narrative is a bit more interesting and it's got a little bit more going on. There are a few more layers and a few more paths to go down with some more interesting characters. The characters in this, the supporting characters, were definitely more interesting than the characters in the first film. So if you saw the first film and maybe didn't love it, but the second film kind of appeals, I'd say give it a go. It's okay. As a one-time watch, I didn't mind it. The pacing is quite good. We get new information or potential leads at a pretty steady pace. It's not one of those films where we get nothing for the bulk of it and then everything right at the end. It's a bit more steady, which I really appreciate. And while Maggie is not the most interesting character, I certainly loved Kirstie Alley's performance as well as I expected. So I didn't mind watching it. I'm glad I've seen it. It's definitely better than the first film, but I don't think I'd watch it again. But if it sounds like it would appeal to you, give it a watch. You don't need to have watched the first film to follow this story, but I'm glad that I watched the first film. It gave me a deeper insight into the character of Stark, so I would certainly recommend doing that if you're keen on watching them. But even if you just want to watch Mirror Image, then you can follow it well enough. It's an okay film. Kirstie Alley was great. Surovy gave a great performance, of course. And the story, the mystery, it's not too bad.